Welcome again, everyone. We are here in session 3, stream 1, creating a collective community. Our next session is titled, It Takes a Village, creating pathways to overcome systemic barriers and create opportunities for hope. We will hear from our presenter, Liora Sobel. If you're in the wrong session, please navigate to the session you're looking for through the menu on the left side of your screen. Click on the sessions button and then click on the session you'd like to attend. We will open up our session at the end for Q&A, and please be sure to type your questions in the dedicated Q&A box in the bottom of the broadcast window. Please note it is not the chat box, but the Q&A box. Liora Sobel has a degree from McMaster University in Women's Studies and has worked in various shelters, counseling, and resource centers over the past 15 years. Liora's career has focused on empowerment of women and breaking down the barriers and social constructs that enable gender-based violence. Through progressive management, Liora is the executive leader of a complex multi-resource center for women in York Region. Liora's leadership has earned her organization recognition through the community as a non-for-profit of the year in 2018 and a finalist again in 2022. Liora lives in Newmarket, Ontario with her partner and 2 young children, and it is my delight and honor to present and welcome Liora. Over to you.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. So thank you, Jessica, for the introduction. Again, my name is Liora Sobel, and I'm here to present to you a bit more about collaborative pathways. And I'm going to share my slides with you now. So in preparation for this event and looking at collaborations, what it brought back to me was that notion, it takes a village. Together, we can create more opportunities and overcome barriers. So Jessica introduced me a bit. I wanted to share a slide here of me and my family and a bit about myself. I want to tell you a story about a girl. Going back to about 14 years of age, things aren't going so well for her. The school is noticing that there's problems, concerns, seeming awfully sad and depressed and anxious, losing weight, not eating well, and the school gets concerned and gets involved. And they call in children's services to look at the situation, what is going on, how do we help this individual? And it's decided at that time that for the person's safety and well-being, that it would be most important to place them in a different environment and into a social group home. And through that process, I tell you about this woman, and where I'm going with this is my start to life and how I started to work in gender-based violence and learning about the collaborations. My experience in those years was one of a very narrow pathway with little collaboration from various places to help support the growth of me and my peers as individuals, and entering the system as an adult with very little skills and navigation in order to get where I wanted to be. Again, I show you this picture of my family and I because I show you that this is the average person, and the clients that come to us are the average people. And I want to instill through my discussion today and through talking to you how important it is that we recognize the multifaceted needs of individuals, and that it is our sister, our brother, our neighbor, our partner, our relative of some sort. It's the person next door that we need to be there for and to help. So why is it important to collaborate? My organization, we're running really well. Things are going well. Women's needs are being met. Why would I want to look to other organizations? We know that we're great at what we do and that we have a holistic approach to our services. In order for me to answer some of these questions, I want to first look at some individual needs and some models, working theories. The first one I introduced to you is the biopsychosocial model. And looking at this model, it looks at the interconnectedness of biological, psychological, and social factors and how they play a role in a person's health. In consideration of this model and the treatment of clients as practitioners, service providers, we want to understand the individual from that holistic perspective. So just to define them, biological, it's often associated with the relationship of disease of the body, psychological, the aspects of mental and emotional wellness, and also the relationship to behavior, and social, the interpersonal factors such as social interactions and community activities. In looking at an example of how this interplays together, we saw a lot of this in the pandemic, where it pushed us to really consider this model further as to why there were greater physical and mental health illnesses that were more difficult to treat. And we looked at factors using this model that impacted the health. So, for example, how social isolation may exacerbate a person's ability to recover from their illnesses. This model supports the treatment and prevention of illnesses. But as somebody speaking to you today, working from a social services organizations, we're not specifically working with illnesses. We're looking at some of the non-medical factors that influence health and outcomes. And so with that, I want to move on and introduce you a bit more to the social determinants of health. Work started coming through about the social determinants of health in 2003. And through its growth, it has been worldwide national attention. The social determinants of health refers to a specific group of social and economic factors within a broader determinants of health. They relate to the individual's place in society and things like their education, employment, income. It talks to experiences of discrimination, historical trauma, racism, and the importance of these determinants when we look at the outcomes for minority groups and groups who are that much more vulnerable. In 2012, the World Health Organization defined health as, quote, a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmary, and how reaching one's full potential is directly correlated to health. And so this is where we see the social determinants of health moving away from that biopsychosocial model to address other issues in a person's life outside of the physical illness. I work in a feminist organization working with women, and it's no secret that a lot of the work we do is in gender equity and areas of education. We have seen a lot of movement with this feminist movement in gender equity in the areas of education and labor force, but we are far from over the inequalities between men and women. And there continues to be many harms in other experiences, working from a place of culture, race, working conditions, childhood experiences. And so when we look at a model such as the social determinants of health, we see that the influence have on these outcomes for the individual. I want to take a moment just to take you through the main determinants of health. And this is defined by the Government of Canada. So it's there's 12 of them. Number 1, income and social status. 2, employment and working conditions. 3, education and literacy. 4, childhood experiences. 5 is our physical environment. 6, social supports and coping skills. 7, healthy behaviors. 8 is access to health services. 9, biology and genetic endowment. 10 is gender. 11, culture. And 12 is race and racism. Canada itself is one of the healthier of countries. And within that, we still see opportunities to improve the health of people's lives. So by saying that, with the government, the goal is to reduce health inequalities and to help everyone give an opportunity at the same chances, the same opportunities, healthier, no matter where they come from, what they live, and what their situation is, and always working to reduce some of those inequalities, and again, addressing the social determinants of health. And to quickly tell you the three branches from the Government of Canada that has been identified, one is strengthening the evidence base to inform decision-making, engaging beyond the health sector, and sharing knowledge across Canada. And I tie this all back to the services that we provide and the need for the collaboration being extremely important if we are going to address the determinants of health so broadly impacted that not one single organization could address all 12 of these. And going back to what the government is saying about engaging beyond the health sector. So it's not just about illnesses and at hospitals and doctors' offices, but also in these social services environments and programs. So I've talked a bit about the work that I do, and what we really focus on is gender-based violence. And I'd like to define here for you, gender-based violence refers to harmful acts directed at an individual based on their gender. It is rooted in gender inequality, the abuse of power, and harmful norms. Gender-based violence is a serious violation of human rights and a life-threatening health and protection issue. And I relate this back to the social determinants of health, not just because of gender inequality, but because gender-based violence negatively reinforces so many of the other determinants of health. There's a concept we talk about in feminist organizations as intersectional feminism. And it's the acknowledgement that everyone has their own unique experiences and that their own experience and oppression is something we must consider when we're considering anything about marginalized individuals. So we look at the intersecting factors, things like gender, race, class, sexual orientation, physical ability, and how all of those create greater levels of oppression for different people in different circumstances and when it comes to gender-based violence. I'm going to switch shifts for a moment now. I've given you a lot of the theoretical reasons why we need to look holistically at an individual and why we need to look at how we treat them and at different levels, and understanding that where we're in organizations, while we are doing a good job, there are so many places we need to collaborate with in order to address the full scope of an individual and their needs, and that being different for everybody. So I want to talk very quickly, briefly about an opportunity that I had and a project that I worked on. And working in this field and in leadership roles, we spend a lot of time in the VAW sector working with like-minded organizations, other shelters, the police, children's services, legal aids. We work a lot with other organizations who are seeing the same clientele as us. But an eye-opening experience for me was when I was working some years ago at a young parent resource center in Toronto, and also an organization, feminist organization, focused on the empowerment of women and ending gender-based violence. And one of the things that we saw and that we continue to see is women from different backgrounds, again, those oppressors. So we found that young women, their outcomes, especially as a young parent, were a lot more challenged than the outcomes of somebody who had lived in a different situation. They were of a higher socioeconomic class. They were in school, they were in their education, as opposed to a young woman who had to stop her education because she was pregnant at a young age and to become a parent. And one of the goals we looked at was, how do we create an employment opportunity for somebody who doesn't have the opportunity at this point to go on to post-secondary education? And our working theory was that she shouldn't have to work at an entry-level job. So I spent a lot of time considering what elements I could create and what kind of a social enterprise and business that I could put together that addressed the woman's needs, gave her equal opportunities in the workplace, and a way to live above the poverty line. Because one of the things that we often see is women living below the poverty line with insecure housing, insecure food sources. And what was the way I was going to help people to change that? And that's where I developed and worked on a social enterprise at the time called All About Kindness. And being working with young parents, we developed a social enterprise as a fast track education to work in doula services for women. I won't get into too much of the details about it, but the idea took off quite quickly. And where I come back to about collaboration is that sometimes we have to get comfortable with collaborating in different areas than what we're used to collaborating in. So I was very comfortable collaborating in my area in these VAW organizations. And it was very clear that in order to address the needs of these individuals, again, going back to the social determinants of health, I needed to go far beyond that scope of VAW. I need to get it into the business world, the corporate world, into the finances and the funders, into the healthcare system. There was many more systems that I needed to collaborate with. And it showed me very quickly the urgency to do that. So it was just an example I wanted to give to demonstrate how even when we feel we are comfortable in collaborations, we often need to take it that one step further. So where is the urgency for us to put this call to action to build these networks for the collaboration? Working with in the VAW sector, I wanted to take a moment to highlight some of the urgency based on the data and the stats that we have, and some of them being startling. Intimate partner violence has increased over 30% during this pandemic. In Canada, the proportion of women killed by a spouse or intimate partner is over 8 times greater than that proportion of men. And that is based on Statistics Canada. In 2020, 160 women and girls were killed by violence. And in 2021, that number increased to 173 women. Along with VAW and the experience of trauma is the health outcomes. And again, relating it back to the determinants of health and the biopsychosocial model we talked about. So I wanted to give you a few more stats. 93% of homeless mothers have experienced interpersonal trauma. 96% of people suffering from psychiatric illnesses from adolescence have histories and exposures to trauma. 70% of children in foster care have multiple traumas, and 75% of adults with substance abuse have also faced multiple traumas. So when we look at the presenting history and someone coming in using, for an example, an addiction, if we were to just fix the addiction, and when they say fix the addiction, I mean treat the addiction, help the person to find new coping mechanisms. If we're not looking at the whole person and some of the traumas that they have been through, we're missing a critical piece in their health and their well-being. So at the beginning, when I asked, why do we need to collaborate when we're doing so well at the work we do, my intention over the last 15 minutes or so was to demonstrate how multifaceted the approach to supporting people has to be. And in terms of impacting long-term outcomes, we require the expertise of people from so many different areas. So one thing I truly believe is that the first step to collaboration is to break down the barriers. We need to have an interdisciplinary approach to supporting the holistic nature of each individual's needs. In the work that I do, we support women with many things, including skill development and counseling. But while we understand the barriers that women face in things like language and accessibility, we cannot address all the factors. And the way that we can ensure a woman will be most successful is for her to have the use of community services as a whole to support her, rather than having her need to figure out where she can go to meet her individual needs. We do not want to leave it for her to navigate all the barriers she may incur that is threatening to her health and her well-being and ultimately her own safety. So identifying and working to reduce the barriers is one of the greatest priorities we have. And I just want to flip back just a second to where I introduced at the beginning my own story of a youth in care and leading into the adult system. This was over 25 years ago, and things have changed drastically. But one of the things that has always driven my career and the need for collaboration is what happened to me when I turned 18. And I was left to figure out the system, and the connection between income and housing and education wasn't there. And in many ways, I felt like I was set up to fail. And I would go out to seek organizations and shelters and places to live and finances and ways to go to school. But each piece brought a new roadblock rather than a connection of the organizations collaborating together to help me across those various areas and to break down those barriers. And hence why I'm so passionate about that. So as we've mentioned, I work for the executive director of the Women's Center of York Region. We always talk about embracing change and empowering women. I'll take you for a moment very quickly. I'd like to share with you our vision, mission, and values. Before I do that, I would like to tell you that we have begun a new strategic plan in April. So some of these have been updated from people who've been working with us for a while have known. Our vision is to see women thriving socially, emotionally, and economically. For our mission, it's using a strengths-based, trauma-informed, feminist approach. We provide opportunities, support, and resources to all persons who identify as women on their journey of self-discovery and empowerment. And at the Women's Center of York Region, we're guided by the following values: inclusivity, collaboration, innovation, and empowerment. And rather than going through the details of each one, I will let you know that collaboration, we achieve greatness and great things by working together, embracing change, and seeking possibilities. So as you can see, well aligned to the conversation I'm having you about how important collaboration is, this is a driving factor of our values here at the work that I do. And when I mentioned to you a bit about our strategic plan, our new one, Our Way Forward, began April 1st, 2022, our new fiscal year, and is guiding our work over the next 3 years. What's significant for me to share with you in that is that we have 3 strategic priority areas. And our strategic priority number 1, our one area is called Build for the Future. And it is defined by collaborating and engaging with partners and the community to further strengthen the impact and value of our services. And it's through this strategy, where we put a focus onto identifying where the gaps in services are, where we can fit into those gaps, and where and who we need to collaborate with. With that being said, the Women's Center is a complex multi-resource center offering women's services in counseling, helping women to leave abusive situations, life skills training, employment readiness, and financial literacy programs, just to quickly give you an overview of that. So with the Women's Center, we have a lot of community collaborations that we are currently at, and it is a bit of a spider web effect. And it's something as leaders that we need to bring together. There's many tables we sit at. And I know as I only have about 10 minutes left, I will just quickly address and can go into more detail if there's some questions, but some of the collaborations that we have together in York Region, we have the York Region Violence Against Women Coordinating Committee, where we bring together stakeholders and collaborators all across the region of anybody who may work with a woman on any aspect of her journey involved in gender-based violence. We look at ways that we can support each other, from shelters to housing, food security, skills development, and programs across the region. It brings together places like the Children's Aid Society, it brings together the police, and it brings us all to one round table. And while I could go on and talk to you a lot about this that we have, I also want to say that, what I want to address through this is that through this collaboration, other collaborations come out. So we are able to address as a community when we see a gap. Some years ago, going back a few years ago, just before COVID, we saw some areas of challenges between Children's Aid Services and the violence against women field, and what we were seeing when abused women and their children were getting involved in the system. And there was on both sides some frustrations and some challenges. And together we saw an immediate need to come together to create a new collaboration. So when we sit at tables like this, we find other areas in which we can create smaller groups and brackets where we can collaborate and target specifically where the issues and the needs are at that time. And generally it spans across most of the region. Many of you, I understand today, are here from Ontario, and I want to just quickly brush upon the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan Work Framework. And this is a commitment that's been brought to us through Ontario. Now, I'm not sure how much everybody knows about it, so I'm just going to quote very quickly from the Ontario government. Community safety and well-being cannot rest solely on the shoulders of the police. It is a shared responsibility by all members of the community and requires an integrated approach to bring together municipalities, First Nations, and community partners together to address a collective goal. Breaking down existing silos and encouraging multi-sectorial partnerships are essential in developing strategies, programs, and services to help minimize risk and improve the overall well-being of our communities. Our government is committed to fighting crime, victimization, and violence on every front, because each and every person deserves to live in a safe, secure community. For me, that is very important to highlight and to bring to the table, because everything I've talked about and over the years and the work that we've done, the province has stepped up to say exactly what we're here talking about today, about the collaboration and how important it is that we recognize as a community, as a province, as regions, as organizations, the importance of, again, I'll go back to the social determinants of health and addressing people where they are at and with these multifaceted approach of collaboration. Just going down to the municipal level, as I've mentioned, I'm here in York Region. In York Region, the provincial plan has been handed down to the regions. And in York Region, we have our own community safety and well-being plan. It's a tool with the goal of enhancing community safety and well-being through proactive, targeted, and community-driven actions. It's a place-based approach, and it puts communities that benefit the most at the heart of the planning. So we're trying to build capacity, identify what needs are, and respond to them locally, This plan has been in consultation with residents, community organizations, local municipalities, the York Regional Police, and other stakeholders. Out of it came 6 strategic objectives, as well as looking at key priority tables and how that work, how we would leverage what we knew in the data we had to strengthen these communities and to prioritize how we can create preventative initiatives and bridge gaps where they exist, again, for the betterment of the community and safety and well-being of our region. Oh. So in wrapping up, just talking a bit about the lessons learned and the path forward, I think I'm making good timing getting into Q&A. What I just want to share here is that when we look over the span of, as I began at the beginning, and over the span of the last 25, 30 years, we've gone from being siloed organizations, community organizations, infrastructure such as the police and the education system, and more we're coming together to collaborate. And I think when I mentioned to you about the community action tables in York Region, and I mentioned about the strategy of the province, it's a way of us showing that we're finally coming together and we're bringing together everybody with a stake at this, someone who has a role to play in the, again, social determinants of the health of the individual, and that together we can do this. In terms of looking at the path forward and what is needed, I mean, the first focus is, as a province, and again, for those of you in Ontario, regionally, there will be one of these plans in place in every region across Ontario. And so one of the places for us all as community leaders to go back to is to go to our region and to look at what our region is doing and what role in our region can we play in that path forward in addressing the needs of our community. We are the voice for our clients. So being at those tables, we are able to advocate and to ensure that the needs of our clients are being met beyond just the scope of the work we ourselves are doing. So with that, I want to open up the floor to some questions and answers. I appreciate everybody taking the time to hear what I've had to say, and I'd be very pleased to expand on anything or answer any questions if the audience has any.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Liora, for your presentation. And we are very grateful to learn about some of the regional initiatives, learn about some of the initiatives that you have been working and are continuing to push forward. And I certainly appreciate the sentiment between, you know, moving that needle from a siloed type of group of organizations to more of an organism and working that path forward to bringing that organism into a fully functioning, collaborative net, if you will, that can catch and represent all of the issues. And like you said, there's no one organization at this stage that could address all 12 of those determining factors. And that is, you know, where we really do need to come together to say, we can't specialize in everything, but there are specialists in almost everything. And this conference is certainly a good example of that, and how we have brought experts together to say, where are the gaps that we haven't been able to identify yet? And what can we do to bridge those gaps and learn to leverage off of the excellent work that people have established before us? And how can we build on that to create more cohesion, more safety, and really change the social climate of the way abuse is perceived and the way that people feel set up for success, or in your case, feel as if the system has been set up for their failure, and changing that perception, changing that perspective. And so I really appreciate you giving us such a brief and quick overview. And certainly I think, you know, we could drill down into any one of the things that you mentioned and talk for days. So I really appreciate the expert wisdom that you bring to the table and been able to sort of summarize and articulate that. I do want to encourage our live listeners and our audience to participate in the Q&A. As I had mentioned in the beginning, there is a Q&A box down in the broadcast window on the left side in the blue bar that says Q&A. And I would encourage you to type your questions in there so I can read them out for Liora, and we can have her answer them. Now, Liora is a very professional and highly skilled, bringing lots of experience to the table. It is such a privilege and honor to have her here available to us. And so I want to encourage you to ask some questions. If there's something that you could see as a benefit to your organization, or how the implementation strategies were successful, or what ways that you think you could glean from her. If she was sitting in your living room or in your office, what are the questions that you would ask? And how her experience could translate into ways that you've never thought or would think about improving your realm of influence or your reach in this type of environment. And so please type in your questions and we'll be certain to get them up and answered. And I will just kick off the questions now. I really appreciate the fact that you did talk about the provincial platforms and the initiatives that are happening, bringing together community action tables. Could you tell us a little bit more about how your center, your organization is plugging into that, and what that looks like in a more practical application, please?
Yes. So the provincial government came with this initiative to the municipal level, so to the regional municipality of York. And through the Human Services Planning Board of York Region, a board that I've been on for the last 4 years, we looked at what the needs of the community are and developed 4 community action tables. The focuses established were to inform the development of the plan and provide the infrastructure to enhance the community, give us the capacity to identify and respond locally to the needs. The collaborative tables bring together various stakeholders, a broad range of stakeholders, residents, service providers, organizations, grassroots groups, York Region Police, municipal government, local funders. I'm trying to remember them all. The priority in York Region was to look at where could we say in York Region, we had 4 priority areas that we needed to step into to provide services to the people in those areas. And those areas were identified, in York Region is fairly big, North Georgina, South Central Markham, Newmarket, and South Central Richmond Hill, tongue twister. While some of you may not be familiar with those areas do span across the region. And each table, one of these community action tables, were asked to identify and to come up with what their focus area was, their 2 top risk factors that faced the population in the areas that they were working with. Across the board in all 4 CAT tables, mental health came up as one of the biggest issues and a top priority for the individuals. And just to take that just a step further, again, I know I've said a few times about the social determinants of health and the biopsychosocial model, but you can see if one of our biggest risks that we are facing with our residents is mental health, how much that is interconnected to the health and well-being of the individual. For my organization, in North Georgina, they identified economic stability as a concern and a risk factor for the residents. There's a lot of various people and groups living out in that area. It's a more marginalized community, being a bit further north in the region. And they wanted to create a plan and ways that we can help to ensure some more economic stability. And here at the Women's Center of York Region, we were invited to that CAT table to present our program on our career readiness program. Very quickly, I could spend hours talking about our programs, but our career readiness program is a career exploration program. And what we see is that in order to get a job and to find employment, you need skills. And in obtaining employment and maintaining the employment is what is important. So we see that 20 to 30% of the work is your skills, but 70 to 80 of that is your soft skills. How do you relate to people? How do you speak? How do you interact? And we find that people are more often likely to end or terminate their employment prematurely for the soft skills. So that is what our program focuses on. So we took our program to the community action table in Georgina and have been able to set up the program to ensure that the residents of Georgina are benefiting from this, gaining these skills, and that we are helping them to navigate through economic stability and finding careers and meaningful careers that are lasting. So that's just a good example of how we've been called to one of the tables.
That's excellent. And what a powerful and profound example you gave us there. Thank you for bringing it down to a practical touch point and how it really does impact and relate to the people right around us. And you're absolutely right. It certainly, is an area that, unless we are aware of the fact that there is this issue, it may seem as if it's the same as maybe where we live a little more south in Newmarket or in Aurora. We're not facing that same type of issue, but just our neighbors to the north of us yet are experiencing that. And it's very interesting that you say the mental health is one of the primary things that keep coming up. And also in connection with the economic stability, have you noticed there has been a significant increase, especially in the mental health as a post-pandemic environment?
100%. We have seen a huge increase in mental health concerns, crises, illnesses. And unfortunately, with our healthcare system stretched thin, we are having a very difficult time getting medical supports and interventions for women. And so by you mentioning that, I will share very briefly, we have a program here that we call Making Changes, and it's a life skills development group. And it's founded on some of the premises of a mental health treatment called dialectical behavioral therapy. And in that, it looks at a person from various different aspects, but it's also a treatment that is not targeted for 1 or 2 weeks, but it spans across a year. Because to see meaningful change, we want to bring a person across the spectrum, and that can't be done in 10 weeks or so of a group. So we're getting a lot more referrals from psychiatrists and social workers in the community for women to take this course and program, because they've seen over time how we address not just the mental health, the depression, the anxiety, but we look at the healthy boundaries and relationships and communication. And these are the skills that people often need to develop. Just lastly on that, interestingly, our program was all about inclusion and reducing social isolation. So we saw a dramatic change when we had to enforce isolation, and the way we were able to mobilize our group to a virtual platform to ensure that we still had women connected and that we could still build on that social inclusion through that program.
Wow, that is very tremendous. And it's unfortunate that we are in the environment that we are, and we're seeing increases because of the nature of what we've been through. But it's extremely touching. And I was just getting the goosebumps as you were saying it, that, there is such an engaging effort to connect and to bring that touch point where it matters, and to really create that lasting change. And you lend the same principle to the soft skills that people are requiring when it means, getting a job, but keeping a job, or bringing that life change. It requires not just the ability to be placed in the environment, but to sustain the type of environment and then learn how to thrive in that environment. And dealing, with regular issues like anxiety and just not knowing how to navigate or handle some of the overwhelming feelings and new things that are being faced with. I mean, it can be hard enough for any of us, especially coming out of the environments that we've come out of. So especially for those who've already started off in a very difficult place, I can only imagine how impactful and necessary your services are for anyone that is needing any type of assistance. And it's encouraging to hear that you're having a lot more collaboration and cross referrals from the doctors and from the healthcare professionals. And one of the key areas that we are really targeting is medical professionals, health professionals, psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers, the people who are on the front lines talking to people and survivors and people who want to become thrivers and say, well, where are these resources? Where are the effective ones? And how can we plug people in? So it's more than just a collaborative strategy session. It's a practical application session for where the rubber hits the road. And that is a tremendous, to me, a tremendous success story to hear of. What maybe, if you want to share with us, we have a couple minutes left. Maybe talk about some of the strategic collaborations aside from the ones you mentioned, or if you have success stories. These sound a lot like very good success stories, but if there's one particular one or a few that you really want to highlight, or talk about some of the strategic collaborations that have resulted in success stories, whether it's at the strategy level or whether it's impacting all the way down to the boots on the ground. We'd love to hear more.
Okay, so let me just briefly start with when I mentioned our new strategic plan. Based on what we had seen coming out of COVID and throughout this pandemic, it really hit us how important it was for us to collaborate and to create those pathways for collaboration. And one of the things that we felt really was affected by COVID was our usual methods of collaborating and being at these tables together, and to move them from in-person to virtual. And it's not that same as having that dialogue at the end of a meeting. If you want to hear a success story, this one's actually exciting for us, as that it just happened very recently. As you introduced at the beginning, the Women's Centre of York Region made finalists for the 2022 Business Excellence Awards of the Not-for-Profit of the Year. And when we attended the event, we recognized a woman at the event. And she came up to us and she was very excited. And she talked to us about her new business that she had just started. And the more we spoke to her, the more we learned that she was a client of the center. She had gone through our counseling program. She had done our Enterprising Careers, our career readiness program. She had also worked through our financial literacy program, which we call financial empowerment. And she took all these lessons and all these learnings, and she took it together to start her own business. And as she developed her business, she really relied upon the skills that we had taught her and that we had worked with her with through this difficult time. She ended up meeting an incredible business partner, and they continued to grow and build their business. And here they were at the same Business Excellence Award. And I will tell you, they won Best New Startup Business of 2022. So when we left the award ceremony, although the Women's Centre of York Region did not win Not-for-Profit of the Year, this was a bigger win for us, for one of our clients to create her own business and to be recognized as the Small Business of the Year. That was our biggest win.
Wow. I don't think it gets any better than that. And I am just having the goosebumps everywhere. And I love the way that you position that, as though your center didn't win, the fruit of your hard work, your effort, and your labor has landed the award. It doesn't get more victorious than that. So thank you for sharing that story with us. And even as you were saying it, it's that is the evidence of a powerful program. And again, it's how you're honoring and respecting the whole person and looking at the person from all of the perspectives and angles, and what it is that they are, who it is they are, and how they can find a place to thrive in the tables that they're called to sit at, or that they want to create for themselves. So thank you so much to you and to your team and to everybody that you partner with for doing such inspirational work. I know I'm very excited that we get to collaborate more together, and I'm I'm thrilled and I'm passionate about what it is that you do and how we can collaborate together. And hopefully through even this conference, we'll bring more people together as a collective to do more of this where the rubber hits the road, and see many more awards being given for the people that have successfully graduated your program and have trained others to do so. And with that, I really want to thank you again. We are just about out of time, but it has been a pleasure. And I thank you so much. Have a great day, Liora. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.